Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Igama lami ngithandwa tukahlanga umuntu ongwawuyongwa imalinga undima kankumbuzo umntana wenkosi ongathi inkosi mntwini. Once again, we meet on this wonderful Sunday at 6 o'clock to speak about some aspects of the politics in our day-to-day. And welcome on Ponte Politik. I welcome you if you are watching with us wherever you are. It's great to have you, and we appreciate your presence in our conversations and our discussions at different times. Over the past weekend, South Africa and the South Africans woke up, and I would say also to the Africans in the world, woke up to the news of the passing of Umntwana kaPhindangene, the Prime Minister of the Amazulu people in KwaZulu-Natal, Prince Gatsha Buthelezi. He died at 95 years of age after a long life in politics of our country. And his death, I would say, it would have been anticipated because over the past few weeks he has been in and out of hospital, and I'm one of the people who actually were expecting that he would transition to his ancestors earlier than this particular weekend. So we woke up to this news, ukushona kukamntwana kaPhindangene, Prime Minister of Amazulu, Utata Gatsha Buthelezi. First and foremost, Ponte Politik would like to convey its condolences to the family of Umntwana, including the Amazulu people in KwaZulu-Natal. They have lost one of their stalwarts. They have lost one of their prominent participants in the traditional norms of Amazulu tradition in that society. They have lost somebody whom they refer to as a very wise person. They say somebody who has been in the center of the developments in that Amazulu kingdom, as we have seen in the past few months with the issues relating to the coronation and the appointment and all of these contestations between the sons of Isilo Samabandla, who had transitioned a few years or a few months ago. And also we have seen, even in that particular process, different and disagreements between the statements, outside the statements that were being signed by the name Umntwana kaPhindangene, making a contradictory, taking a contradictory position in relation to the king of Amazulu, Kumkani. So there has been a lot of controversies around those particular things, which are less of my interest in this conversation. But I'm saying them because as part and parcel of my condolences into that particular society, I thought it is important to mention that particular aspect, but also within the political terrain, the political realm, which is the focus of my conversation or the focus of my thoughts in this particular video and in this particular episode. South Africa's politics has lost one of its long-serving members in politics, and also I think he has been one of the longest-serving, he has been one of the longest-serving members of parliament in South African parliament post 1994. So in the democratic dispensation, he is probably one of those people who has served in that parliament for longer than many. But also at the same time, many people in many people's minds, they would also think about his humor, his ways of doing things. But of greater importance is that I would clearly state that Umntwana was an astute politician who had his views, and he was wise enough, politically articulate enough, and able to navigate his way out of many things politically. So I would say that at a political level, also the South African political society, the South African political terrain has lost one of its longest serving participants. We might disagree and agree on things about him. Each person has got their own views about something. It's important, but as a people to identify that he has been one of the longest, and to die at 95 years, still performing in the politics or in the realm of politics, he has been. It's been a very long innings in the language of cricket, if one were to say. But majority of people, therefore, in the passing of Umntwana, they have then came out in different ways, trying to understand his legacy, and that is why we're asking whether Prince Buthelezi legacy, is it a mixed legacy? Is it a conventional or contradictory legacy? Is it a complex legacy? And what is it that we need to consider about his legacy? Because his legacy spans for such a long time in the politics of our society. I mean, a person who came into the politics around the 1940s, that is, and then his demise is only in 2023. That's a very long time. It is something that many people have not experienced. It is something that many people would actually would love to be part of. Would be great to have such a particularity and taking part in such a long period. So condolences to Umntwana Kapinangene, his family, condolences to the Amazulu people, condolences also to everybody else who is affected by the death of Umntwana Kapinangene in one way or the other. Now, we're going to be talking about his legacy in different ways, as articulated by different people over the past few days. And one of the things that I've learned over time as a person who reads history, as a person who reads politics, is that history has got a potential of being curated. It can be curated. History can be curated to a point that it can provide a particular perspective to a collective or to a community, to a people, to a public. It can be influenced so much that the memory of the past, the memory of history, can then be that which is distorted in this way, that because the history itself has been curated and has been organized in a way that influences a particular perception about a particular event, a particular person, a particular thing, a particular issue, or a particular society. So this is what tends to happen over time. And it is important to also understand, when you read, you look, and you interpret history and historical events, you also have to understand as to its potentiality of it being curated to influence certain perceptions. I think this is an important thing, and we must, as a people, understand that particular dynamic, so that when we interpret people, events, issues, societies, and whatever the case, when we interpret with that understanding that history events can be curated in a particular way. For those that are going to be looking at the legacy of Umntwana Kapindangen, one of the things that you will notice is that he draws. Let me first say, I'm going to start at looking at the past of Umntwana Kapindangen a little bit, so that I can be able to get to where I want to go to in relation to his, whether mixed legacy, whatever you want to call it, his legacy. Around the 1940s, at the University of Fort Hare, there was a group of African nationalists who were influenced extensively by Tademetius, Apimda, and the rest. And they influenced each other to a point that they established a radical aspect of the ANC, which was the Congress Youth League at the time. And Buthelezi, and as aspiring intellectuals at the time, at the university, had other comrades of his, the likes of Oliver Tambo, the likes of Robert Sobukwe, the likes of Godfrey Pichi, who was also a senior to them, and many others who were at the forefront. They established what is called the Congress Youth League, that is now, and this became a more of a radical move, or a radical organ of the ANC, because at the time it seemed as if the ANC was a little bit was always been too accommodative in relation to certain things. Now, and then Umntwana had spent most of his formative years in politics in the ANC, in the African National Congress, to a point that even after his graduation, he became a staunch member of the ANC. And then there was the 1960s, there was the unburning, and all these things that took place in South Africa. And at the time, Umntwana remains the member of the ANC, a staunch member of the ANC. And we need to understand the African National Congress's dimension of liberation in how it understood the struggle against apartheid as to how it is going to be done. One, they said it must not only be approached militarily, because for one reason or the other, probably they felt like South Africa had one of the most strongest military power. And also, the second one was the fact that there must be international sanctions against South Africa. That was also another front. But also there was also another front of the cultural boycott, which included the sports and artists and so on and so forth. But there's a lag that majority of people and conversants and political scientists, including historians, that do not tend to interrogate here, is that the cultural aspect, that means, sorry, not the cultural aspect, but engaging in the fight against apartheid from within. And the ANC's, this is the fourth leg with which the ANC had embarked on. And Umntwana Kapindangen was therefore identified by the African National Congress as a staunch member of the African National Congress as early as the 1960s, late 60s, beginning 1970s, as a person that they must consider to be part of an internal approach or fighting the system from within. Why was this, or why did this thing happen at the time? And there was a time when it came to the attention of Umntwana Kapindangen, as he was supposed to be appointed as a prime minister or whatever the position in the traditional Natal at the time, as for the Zulu people to be part and parcel. Therefore, by default, if he accepts that particular position, he would then participate in the politics of Natal, even though those politics are also within the governance of apartheid. Now, he took this position to the exiled ANC as a respecting, or as they call each other as a disciplined cadre of the movement. he took this position, and the ANC had then adopted and said, no, he must take the position. And historically, it is recorded that one of the people who supported that point was Albert Lutuli, and also another person who had supported this particular point was Walter Sisulu. So then there was an agreement that he must take the position, and therefore that position would then by default put him into the politics of apartheid. And it would be the fourth leg of the ANC's fighting, or the fourth front of the ANC fighting the apartheid government in all fronts, including economic sanctions, cultural boycotts, military, and so on and so forth. So Gatsha Buthelezi umntwana kaPhindangene became the tool of that particular aspect. Now, what did the ANC do, and how did it ensure that umntwana is able to participate in those politics without being picked up that he is an extension of the ANC? You would know that in the liberation struggle, or in the period of apartheid and in the fight against apartheid, there was a lot of organizations that were established. Many of them, you would find the organizations similar to this now, that is Abahlali Basemjondolo. You would then find Abasebenzi Basendaweni Ethile, and then you would find many organizations, grassroots organizations, but aligned to a particular political party. Many of them were aligned to the ANC. You would then find many aspects of those. That's why you then had in the early 90s, late 80s to the early 90s, where you found the UDF. Now, when you look deep into the UDF, you actually realize that there were many organizations, community-based organizations, that were there. So, for him not to be identified as an ANC within the apartheid politics, he then was asked to establish and revive what is called I think they call it something along those lines. And it was a cultural movement. It came it was presented as a cultural movement in Kat. So it was always being understood. You listen to the wording of this particular organization. Understand umkhonto wesizwe. Understand that, umkhonto wesizwe, inkatha yenkululeko yesizwe. Yeah, I think yayibizwa kanjalo, inkatha yenkululeko yesizwe, and all that. So you will need to have to go and check this particular name of this organization that umntwana kaPhindangene had to lead, but it was a front, or it was an extension of the ANC, because the ANC had believed that the fight against apartheid must be fought in all fronts. Now, by 1975, it was further revived clearly. It was clearly revived, participating in the politics, but constantly, when you listen to him in the earlier days, you can see that he refers to these principles of the African National Congress, and he talks about the release of the African National Congress leaders and all that. But he participated in these politics because the decision was made by the ANC for him to be an extension. Now, if you want to see this extension, look at the colors that he uses therefore at that time when he starts, with some little bit of augmentation of including of red and something. So if you look at those particular colors, you can see that the underlying message is the African National Congress colors, the underlying message. But then there's an augmentation a little bit that you find in the coloring itself. But if you listen to the messaging itself was constantly revolving around the African National Congress. What am I saying as an extension to up to today? I would claim, if I were my political scientist head, that majority of the time, as much as the IFP has been a critical voice against the corruption of the African National Congress in various ways. But fundamentally, when they have to make a position, they tend to make a position with the ANC, and most of the time. And we have been informed that the IFP has mentioned that Umntwana kaPhinda has transitioned to his ancestors, seeking for a reconciliation between the ANC and the IFP. We'll come back to that as to why the reconciliation. Now, in about 1979, there's disagreements between the movement, this cultural movement, which is an extension of the ANC, led by Gatsha, and there's a disagreement on how these things are taking place. And then at the end, they then move in different directions. But the principle remains the same, but the tactics and the strategies are problematic. It's either the type of leadership that came to power in the ANC at the time, or it's either other things that we would not be privy to. So then there's this disagreement between, and then, but the participation of Umntwana kaPhinda and this particular cultural group is very influential, because Umntwana kaPhinda is a formidable, or is a senior cultural member of Amazulu people in Natal. And also, therefore, he participates, he talks the politics of the day at the time. Now, then on the other side, there are critics of the homeland system. And Umntwana at the time, he doesn't take part to being a fully homeland society. He doesn't say that, he doesn't accept that fully. But the critics, especially those who come from the Black conscious movement, they were like, no, it's a puppet. It's a puppet. The system must be dismantled. It must not. You don't participate in it and want to kill it from inside. The system must be dismantled with no exception. So they criticized him on the basis of that, and so much that they had dealt with him at various aspects and levels, including the funeral of Tata Robert Sobukwe in Massacre, Elando's Echaf. Now, and surely not many people were aware of the decision of the ANC to make an extension with Inkatha Yesizwe Senkululeko cultural movement, which was led by Gatsha, on the basis that Gatsha was the chief. So therefore, that made him more powerful in that part of the world. Now, disagreements take place in the 80s. There's serious disagreements between the ANC and the African, this Nalombuto Gatsha, this, even though it is, I want to emphasize, even though they were the same extension, even though they were, but there's this disagreement that is taking place. And then what then transpires is that the apartheid government at the time had learned in America of infiltrating the liberation movement. They had learned so much the skills of causing a conflict within these particular organizations. And when the UDF was established, it was free for all, and things were going haywire, one direction and the other direction. You don't know who the leaders, you don't know who's taking the final decision. There are people who are leading the UDF, but there are many organizations. Where do they get their mandate? Do they get it from the exiled leadership of the ANC? Where do they, you don't understand what is really transpiring. And also there is an allegation around that the UDF was therefore sponsored by the CIA, and therefore there were many things that were taking place there. And because the apartheid government had identified the disagreement between the ANC and its cultural movement, or its cultural extension led by Gatsha, this Inkatha cultural movement, then they ensured that they fueled that particular disagreements. And those particular disagreements then took and expressed themselves in many ways, including during the UDF, the Inkatha, the ANC fights, and so on and so forth. And I would claim that the people who might have been involved in all of those things, they might have not known that it was the decision of the ANC to make Inkatha Inkululeko Yesizwe cultural movement its extension and participate in the politics of the apartheid from Natal, using Chief Gatsha Buthelezi as its proxy. So by the 80s, late 80s and the 90s, I don't think majority of people has known that. But also, Utatu Gatsha Buthelezi has gone through to his ancestors. I don't think he has publicly acknowledged that particular aspect, but there are documents within the ANC that confirm that particular decision of making Inkatha Inkululeko Yesizwe as its extension and participation in the politics of apartheid as a form of a fourth front of the ANC, and therefore umntwana kaPhindangene comes also from that. I'm raising this. I don't want to raise things that are probably known. I want to raise things that are not very much known in the public discourse. I'm actually taking out the archives. I'm giving you some archives around the issue of the legacy of umntwana kaPhindangene. Now, by the late 80s and by the 1990s, there is a serious tension taking place between those who are supporting Inkatha Inkululeko Yesizwe or Inkatha cultural movement and those that are supporting the ANC. And I dare say, both of them, they did not know that Inkatha is an extension of the ANC, and probably there was then that influence. And also at the same time, there might have been a situation where those people who were involved, including umntwana kaPhindangene, they might have influenced some of the things that took place. People mention Boipatong, people mention certain massacres where the supporters of Inkatha were killing the others, and so on and so forth. So there is this particular background that I'm bringing as something that would maybe open up and understand what type of legacy are we talking about when we talk about this particular person, umntwana kaPhindangene. Now, over the past weekend, we've been bombarded by different ways and different interpretations of umntwana kaPhindangene. And one were to say, if you were to consider it, in the newspapers, there has been different ways of interpreting umntwana's legacy, and in different ways. Many people have looked at him and have seen him, and say the founder and president of Inkatha Mangosuthu Gatsha Buthelezi, who was serving as a prime minister of AmaZulu, has died. Yeah, and they look at him and they look at his particular legacy, and they feel like it was something that is he has served not only the people of AmaZulu, but he has also served the people of South Africa politically. So there are different interpretations of Utata Mangosuthu, and there are others. You would have seen that a political career defined by apartheid ministers and Zulu nationalism. And again, if one were to say, you listen to my background and what I was talking about, and I was saying that he participated in the apartheid politics as an extension of the ANC. And if you don't want to believe this, just look at the relationship between Utata Mandela and Utata Buthelezi, and you probably know the decision around the issue of making him a proxy within the apartheid politics. So this writer, Umerdi Haas, is talking about the very same thing, that he had, Utata Buthelezi had a political career that was defined by apartheid ministers and his Zulu nationalism, and so on and so forth. There are different interpretations of him, and also you listen to the EFF also raising some important aspects around condolences of Tatu Buthelezi, and its statement is like many other statements of political parties that have come through. It's vague. It's not explicitly attacking, but it's promoting umntwana kaPhinangene in the post-apartheid South Africa as one of the important participants in that environment. And there was also the ANC has also given its statement, and they regard him as one of the greatest participants in the politics of South Africa, and also a receptive person, a very wise elder, and a very wise statesman, and so on and so forth. And they regard him in that he was a person of great influence in parliament. But also there are those who say that he was divisive, he was a divisive leader, but also he was resilient in trying to forge this particular rainbow nation of post-1994. There are other critics also who are saying, Bona, his legacy is just a legacy of brutality, a legacy of that must not be promoted, because it is a legacy of killing. It is a legacy of causing homelessness and so on and so forth. And the person who has made that particular argument, and very strongly, is Budmondli Makanya, who puts it across that Mangosuthu Buthelezi has a murderous legacy. So there are various people and various ways in the interpretation, and most of them they do regard this particular period around the 1990s as a very important period, because at the time, that this is what Mondli Makanya says. He says at the time the person is there was a forging of a nation that was taking place, but Yena, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, was amongst the people who were actually breaking the very same nation that is being forged. Now, he's asking a question as to the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, as to, are you going to ring bells and shower this murderous person, this person of murderous legacy? Are you going to shower him with praises, when actually you knew that he was part and parcel of trying to break down a society or a nation that was being built in the period of the transition? And I would answer and say, even though even though the question is not posed to me, I had said earlier, the IFP was the Inkatha cultural movement before it metamorphosed to being Inkatha Freedom Party, a political party in the eve of 1994. It has always been an extension of the ANC, and therefore, for those who understand the politics of the ANC, they would then, by default, praise Ubaba Gatsha Buthelezi if they come from the ANC. Probably it would be the ordinary citizens who would have, especially those who had experienced those pains around the killing of their loved ones, who would then raise these particular aspects. But also at the same time, it must always be understood within the dimension of what the apartheid government tended to do in ensuring the fight against the African people. And because the African people had been in majority, and therefore what did they do? They would ensure that for them to win whatever that they wanted to win, they must fight against each other. Now, where do we start to look at a legacy of a person? Do we look in their younger years? Do we look at their older years? And I think we look at the life. The life is an important aspect that we must consider. We look at the life. However, there are people who had been, because our memories would be covered by the time which we were interested in. For example, there was a member of a political party who was engaging and being asked about the legacy of Utata Buthelezi, and his focus was merely and entirely in the apartheid period. Like he did that particular. He looked at him and criticized him as a collaborator, as an apartheid collaborator. And then there's somebody else who's younger, born in 1994, who had read the history of the transition in South Africa, and they argue that there's no complexity around the legacy of Tata Mangosuthu Buthelezi. The problem is that Tata Mangosuthu Buthelezi did not do any good, and he then says he did not do any good because his limitation or his interest, or not limitation, his interest of memory is that of the 1990s, which is the period that he's close to because he's born in 1994. Now, he then says his legacy is not complex. It is just a murderous. It's just a murderous. It's just a murderous legacy. You understand? So you look at that, and the reality is, yes, the people of Inkatha cultural movement were fighting against the other people who were regarded as ANC, and this then expressed itself between AmaXhosa and AmaZulu. This was happening, but also it must be understood within these parameters of also the influence. And even those people who were coming from Inkatha, the Inkatha was a cultural movement that was led by Umntwana kaPhindangene. So it is on the basis of that, whether those people were knowledgeable of what they were doing or they were not. But the important thing is they were doing it under the name of Inkatha, and the leader was Umntwana kaPhindangene. And Umntwana kaPhindangene, the bus had to stop with him. So when we talk about a particular legacy in relation to that particular aspect, I think it is important that we consider that. Many critics of the legacy of Utata Buthelezi is that he has never come out in the open and raised an apology around what transpired at that particular period. And therefore, this makes it difficult for anybody to then not criticize him. That is why the people, or even explain how did these things come about. And therefore, he has transitioned to his ancestors now without having the opportunity to, even in public, to give us a confidence as to make us understand, as those who are interested in understanding as to what transpired. Now, you can look at him in different ways. You can look at him in how you want to understand him. And also, what I'm saying is, I'm not condoning or I'm not defending him. I don't have time for defending nonsense. But one thing for sure is that the legacy of Umntwana kaPhindangene is complex, is mixed, and it is intertwined with that of the ANC. And whenever you look at the complexities of him and his ways of doing things, you must always also understand that he was a disciplined cadre of the ANC. Now, let me talk politics. The Democratic Alliance has raised and also its condolences and appreciate the Statesman of Umntwana kaPhindangene. But what was very interesting with me was the statement of the Freedom Front Plus. There was a part where it says Chief Prince Buthelezi is the only person who has apologized on behalf of the Zulu people, because who had apologized on behalf of the Zulu people for the killing of the 4 trekkers, I think so, for the killing of the 4 trekkers by the AmaZulu people. And that shows that he is willing, he's a person who was willing to speak the truth. close quote. That's what Freedom Front Plus says. And for me, that was very interesting to say. So Umntwana kaPhindangene decided to go and apologize to the European settlers who came and slaughtered the African people, including his ancestors. But he had not come out and and apologized to the African people who were killed on behalf of Inkatha cultural movement in the 1990s. Like, is this true? Is this really true that Umntwana kaPhindangene said this? If it's true, it's very problematic, I would say. And therefore, it would be on the basis of this that Abantu would then claim that he was an apartheid collaborator. But for me, this is very tricky and this is very, very problematic. What do we do, therefore, as Africans, as African people, when we consider and see the legacy of, when we talk about people in their, who has transitioned, people who have died? There is this saying in the African culture, you don't speak ill of the dead. That particular saying, where does it apply and how do you navigate it? Does it mean that when you're speaking the truth, you are speaking ill of the dead? Or does it mean, therefore, that the truth is subjective and therefore it becomes impossible for you to speak the truth, your truth about the person who is dead? How do you navigate that? How did it come about, the saying itself? Where does it come from? What are its roots? What influenced that particular way of thinking? Maybe these are important questions when we deal with the issues of legacies and when we talk about specific individuals. But for many, Utatu Mangosuthu Buthelezi was the best thing that has ever happened. And for many, he was an apartheid collaborator, a murderer, and a person that got involved in the killing of his brothers and sisters, the African people. For some, he has been the best politician, statesman, and an icon, a humble and a wise elder. For some, he has been the great cultural leader of the Amazulu people and who has guided the particular people within the nation of people in KwaZulu-Natal. He has guided them to have a stable kingdom, which they call Amazulu. For many people, it is different things at different times. But nonetheless, he has now transitioned to another level of life, to his ancestors, whether he goes to hell, whether he goes to heaven, if there is heaven, if there is hell, wherever he's going, it is it is known by us that his life has been stopped at 95 years. Whatever is left will remain with us to determine whether his legacy was complex, mixed, whatever the case may be. It would be our perceptions, it would be our understandings and our experiences that will determine how we look at Umntwana kaPhindangene for the next coming years. This is the end of our conversation. These are my thoughts and these are my ideas, and also these are fundamentally influenced by opinion. They are not necessarily, they are researched, but they are also influenced by academic opinions, and everything that we say in this particular channel and in these particular episodes is on the basis of a perspective, an opinion, and its purpose is for education and to ensure that there's a greater conversation and an understanding and a growth of a people in our society, as we are a bridge to politics. Pont the politique ngesi-French. Umuntu nguyengwayo umalinge kandima umntana enkosi ongathi Nkosi Mtweni uyabulela once again ngale mini namhlanje ukuba ihleli kunye nathi. We will see you when we see you next week, Sunday. Remember to log on Tuesday at 12 o'clock. This episode will repeat. And also on Friday, there will be another episode that is coming through. Thank you for joining us, and we are looking forward to hearing your comments and questions on this particular discussion and conversation. All the best. Bye-bye.